Today's daf is Nunchet. We are on Nunchet Amud Aleph, 6 lines down from the top where it says Va'amar Rav Hamnuna. Everyone sees it? Va'amar Rav Hamnuna Haro'eh Uchlusei Yisrael. If somebody sees large throngs of the Jewish people, Omer Baruch Chacham Harazim. Blessed are you, Hashem, wise one of secrets, Chacham Harazim. And the reason for this is because in an enormous gathering of the Jewish people, we say that each and every type of personality, each and every type of mind, each and every type of unique identity is represented, and yet Hashem knows them all. So Chacham Harazim is the one who understands the secrets. He knows each and every person's unique qualities, so to speak. As Rashi says, Hayodea Mashe Belev Kol Ela. He's the one who knows what is in the heart of each one of these individual Jews. If the person sees not a large group of Jews, but one of Gentiles, so then he says the pasuk Omer Bosha Imachem, and the rest of the pasuk goes on to say Bosha Imachem Meod Chafra Yoladetchem Hine Acharit Goyim Midbar Tziav Arava, which basically means your mother should be embarrassed and ashamed. The one who bore you should be ashamed, because the end of all of these nations is going to be a wasteland, basically. In other words, it's a way to say that all the nations of the world who are worshipping idolatry are destined for destruction. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Haro'eh Uchlusei Yisrael Omer Baruch Chacham Harazim. He says, if he sees an enormous group of Jews, he says, Baruch Chacham Harazim, she'en da'atam domeh ze lazeh, because each one's mind is not the same as the other, and their faces are not the same. In other words, their identities are unique, and yet Hashem knows all of them. Ben Zomar Uchlusa Al-Gav Ma'ala Behar HaBayit. Once upon a time, Ben Zoma was standing on an elevated place on Har HaBayit, on the Temple Mount. Amar Baruch Chacham Harazim. And even though he said a blessing on the Temple Mount, they didn't arrest him, even though that's what they do today. Baruch Chacham Harazim, he said, blessed are you, Hashem, Chacham Harazim, wise one who knows the secrets. Baruch shebarak kol elu l'shem b'sheni. And he also said, blessed are you, Hashem, who created all of these people to serve me. Which the Rambam talks about in the Perush LaMishnah, that the Chachamim would often say all of society is there in order to produce Talmidei Chachamim, in order to produce the wise people. That's the purpose of the structure of society. So he would be thankful for what he saw. Hu haya omer, he would say, Kama yigiot yaga Adam Harishon ad shematza pat le'echol. Think about how much effort Adam Harishon had to invest before he was able to just eat some bread. For example, Harash, he had to till the soil, Vizara, he had to plant, Vikatzar, he had to reap, Ve'amar, he had to pile the produce up, Vidash, and Vizara, Uverer. These are 3 different processes of purifying the grain. At different levels of purification, in other words, of removing chaff and removing extraneous materials, and removing rocks and everything else, Vitachan, and he had to grind it, V'irkid, and he had to sift, Vilash, and he had to knead it, ve'afan, then he had to bake it, v'char kach achal. So think about the process that goes into bread making. It's a very, very complicated process. And our situation is much better. But I wake up in the morning and I find all this finished for me. It's like the way that we have today. We go to the supermarket. You didn't have to till the soil. You didn't have to plant. You didn't have to reap. You didn't have to do any of those processes. You can go and for $1 get a loaf of bread. So we're in a better position. Think about how much effort Adam HaRishon had to put in before he was able to put on clothing. Gazaz, he had to shear the sheep. Viliben, he had to whiten they would whiten the wool. And then vinapatz, vitava, ve'arag, he had to in all different ways process it. So he had to clear out. He had to comb the wool of all of the all of the different material and all of the different extraneous dirt and other things that are caught in the wool of the sheep have to be cleaned out. And then v'tava, he has to spin it into thread, and then ve'arag, he has to weave the thread into some kind of a garment. So long process. And only then does he have a beged. Only then does he have some kind of a clothing to wear. But I wake up in the morning and it's all done for me. He said, and all the nations get up in the morning and come to my door, and I find it in front of me. In other words, what is he saying? He's talking about capitalism, basically, or the sense that there's a commercial society. So every individual doesn't have to do every malacha himself. There's a marketplace where people have done this work, and all you have to do is go and you buy it. Imagine what Adam HaRishon had to do. So you have to be thankful. His point is, don't take it for granted. You should be thankful for the fact that there's a society that provides all of these different services, that not every individual has to be a society unto himself. So Hu Haya Omer, he would say, Oreach Tov, Ma'u Omer, what does a good guest say? Kama tirchot tarach balabayit bishvili. Think about how many troubles the balabayit, the host, went to for me. Kama basar evi lefanai. Look at all the meat he offered me. Kama yayin evi lefanai. How much wine he offered me. Kama gluskaot evi lefanai. How much bread he put on the table. And everything he did it only for me. In other words, even though the guest is not going to eat everything that's put on the table, he still looks at the meal as a whole and he sees what a great honor the host has done for him. So in the same way, when you go to the supermarket, don't just think, oh, I got a loaf of bread for $1. Think about the fact that we have an entire economy and all of this agriculture that's going on to produce that one loaf. It's not just the one loaf. You have to realize that the one loaf is only there because of the bigger picture of all the loaves that are there. What does a bad guest say? He says, Ma torach balabayit ze patachat achalti balabayit ze. Think about it. What kind of trouble did this balabayit go to? Ma torach balabayit ze. Patachat achalti. I only ate one piece of bread. Chaticha achat achalti. I only ate one piece of meat. Kos achat shatiti. I only drank one cup of wine. Kol torach shetarach balabayit ze lo torach el b'shvil ishto banav. All of the work that he did, he only did for his wife and his children. In other words, he isn't thankful for what the Balabait has done, because he only looks at what he benefited from it. He only looks at the immediate. Just like a person who only thinks about the loaf of bread that he bought at the store. He doesn't think about the fact that there's an entire agricultural economy that produces that loaf of bread. He just thinks about the immediate. So he says, Aloreach Tov Ma'omer. What does it say about the good guest? It says, Zechor ki taskifa ulo asher shoreru anashim. Remember that his action is great about which people sing. In other words, that's talking about an individual who really understands and appreciates the good, the greatness that Hashem has put in the world and all the blessing He's put in the world. And aloreach raketiv lachen yireuhu anashim lo yirekol chachmei lev. And therefore, he says that the people who see it this way, they will not. It's not the way that the chachmei lev, that the wise people should see it. In other words, the point is that a person who's unwise, the bad guest, will see things only from his own selfish perspective, and he won't see the big picture. This is talking about Yishai, the father of David. It says the man in the days of Shaul was old. Baba Anashim means he came with lots of people, but what that literally means is that Baba Anashim means that he was very popular or he was very well known among people. He came among people means he had a crowd around him. Amar Rava says, V'item Rav Zavid, some say it was Rav Zavid, V'item Rav Oshaya, some say it was Rav Oshaya, Ze Yishai Avi David. This is talking about Yishai, the father of David. How so? Shiyatza b'uchlusa, that he would go out with a large group. V'nechnas b'uchlusa, and he would come in with a large group. V'darash b'uchlusa, in other words, he had a big crowd of followers. And he would darash b'uchlusa, means he would also give shiurim, he would teach Torah to a large group. Amar Ula said, Nekitinan en uchlusa beBavel. We say that there's no such thing as uchlusa, as a large mass of Jewish people in Bavel. In other words, where we are strangers, when it's not our land, even if we see 600,000 Jews together, we don't consider it to be a Jewish population in the same way as we would think of it in the land of Israel. So we only say this blessing of Chacham HaRazim in the land of Israel. Tana says in the Tosefta, en uchlusa pechutam shishim ribo. We only say uchlusa, a throng of Jews, when there are 600,000 of them. Then Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, if you see Chachmei Yisrael, one of the Gedolei Chachmei Yisrael, the great Chachamim of Israel, Omer Baruch. Now, whenever the Gemara says Baruch, it means Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, but it doesn't want to spell that out every time. You say the blessing that ends, Shechalak mechochmato lire'av. Blessed are you, Hashem, who has apportioned some of His wisdom to those who fear Him. Chachmei Ovdei Kochavim Omer, when he sees idolaters who are wise, in other words, if you see an outstanding secular scholar, you would say, Baruch shenatan mechochmato livriotav. That's what it says in the Gemara here. The version of the Gra is a different one, libasar vadam, and that's what's actually said in the Shulchan Aruch, that if you see a secular scholar, so let's say if you met Einstein or something like that, he happened to be Jewish, but let's say he's not a Talmid Chacham, so he's not a scholar of Torah, so you might say on somebody like that, instead of saying who gave wisdom to those who fear him, you would say who gave of his wisdom lebasar vadam, to human beings, to flesh and blood.
I thought I remember hearing that if you see a Jewish scholar in secular studies, you generally don't say that. The only blessing you see on Jews is for the Talmud Chachamim.
I think there's a machloket about it. Haroeh Malchei Yisrael, somebody who sees the kings of Israel. Omer Baruch Shechalach Min Kvodo L'Rav. If I'm not mistaken, it's machloket between the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan. I think that there's a difference of opinion. I haven't been through it in a while, but I recall that being the case, that the Aruch HaShulchan says even if he's Jewish, if he's a secular scholar, you still say it. And the Mishnah Berurah, I think, said that if he's Jewish and a secular scholar, you don't. But I have to double check. I'm pretty sure. If you see one of the kings of Israel, you say, blessed is he who gave of his honor to those who fear him, because we presume that the Jewish king, the king of Israel, is somebody who fears God, or at least we hope so. However, if you see one of the kings who is a non-Jewish king, Malchei Ovdei Kochavim Omer Baruch Shenatan Mikivodo Livriotav, and again it should say Lebasar Vadam according to the other version, that he is given of his honor to Basar Vadam, to flesh and blood. So it doesn't use the term Lire'av to those who fear him. Now notice the two differences between the Berachot. One is that in the case of the person who is a Talmid Chacham, or in the case of the Jewish king, it says Shechalak, he shared, and it says Lire'av to those with those who feared him. With those who fear him. Whereas when it's talking about the non-Jewish king or the scholar of non-Jewish studies, it says Shen Natan, that he gave, which is more of a distance between Hashem and the person. He gave it, not that he shared it, and it also doesn't call him the Re'av. He doesn't call him Yere'av, it doesn't call him those who fear Hashem, but simply Lebasar V'dam, flesh and blood. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Le'olam yishtadel adam l'rutz likrat Melchei Yisrael v'likrat Melchei Yisrael bilvad, ela afilu likrat Melchei Ovdei Kochavim. We've seen this earlier in the Masekhet, if I'm not mistaken, that it says a person should always run to try to greet the kings of Israel. Not only the kings of Israel, but even non-Jewish kings. Because if you're fortunate enough to see the times of Mashiach, you'll have the opportunity to see the difference between a Jewish king and a non-Jewish king. Rav Sheshet was blind, as we know from many other sugyot in the Talmud. And one time, everybody was going to greet the non-Jewish king. When he went with them, Rav Sheshet. Okay, so he went to join them, even though he couldn't actually see the king, because he can't see anything. A certain tzedokah, a certain heretic, saw Rav Sheshet. He said to him, he said to him, jugs that are intact you take to the water in order to fill them, but broken jugs, where do you put them? In other words, if you can see, he was dissing him, okay? He's saying, if you're intact, then you can actually see the king, I understand, but why are you coming? You can't even see. What's the purpose of coming? Amar lei, he said to him, come look, I'm going to know more than you. Okay, Chalaf Gunda Kamaita. When the first throng went by, Kika Absha Amarle Hahu Tzedoki Atamalka. When there was a huge sound, a very very loud parade of people going by, and this is the procession that's preceding the king. So the heretic said to Rav Sheshet, "Oh, the king is coming." Amarle Rav Sheshet, "Lo Kate, he's not coming. You're wrong." Chalaf Gunda Tinyana. So then a second one went by. So when the second one went by and it was again very very loud, so the heretic said, "Oh, here comes the king." And what did Rav Sheshet say? Rav Sheshet, "Lo ka'ate malka, you're wrong. The king's not coming yet." Chalif tilitai. This time a third throng went by, and it was very quiet. Amar le Rav Sheshet, "Vaday hashtate malka." He said, "Now the king is coming, not before." Amar le ha'utzedoki. Minalacha. So the heretic said, "Where do you know this from?" Amar le de malchuta da'ara ke'en malchuta d'rakia. because the kingdom on earth is the same as the kingdom in heaven. Dichtiv, Tzeh ve'amata b'har. This is talking about Eliyahu Navi. When Eliyahu Navi goes to Har Horeb, he goes to Mount Horeb as a retreat after he has the showdown with the Nevi'ei HaBa'al, which is the very famous showdown where they have the competition between the two altars, and the fire comes down and consumes the offering of Eliyahu, and he's very, very upset because his outreach project doesn't work. It fails. Everybody goes back to the idolatry anyway, and Hashem sends him to this mountain where he has this vision. And he tells him to stand at the mountain. V'hinei Hashem over v'ruach g'dola v'chazak mifarek harim m'shaber tzelaim lefnei Hashem lo b'ruach Hashem v'achar ruach ra'ash lo b'ra'ash Hashem v'achar ra'ash esh lo v'esh Hashem v'achar esh kol d'mamad daka. So very famously he tells him, first there's going to be a very, very powerful wind that breaks mountains and shatters rocks, and that's not going to be where Hashem is. And then there's going to be a very loud noise, and not in the noise is Hashem. And then there's going to be fire, and not in the fire is Hashem. Where is Hashem? In the very, very small, still voice. Okay? So in other words, he said, in the same way, when do you know the king is here? When it's silent. When you can hear a pin drop, that's when you know the important person came. Because everyone's silent. Nobody's going to be partying and so loud when the king is passing by. They're going to stand with reverence, and that's how he knew the king was coming. When the king actually came, Rav Sheshet said the blessing on seeing the king, which we learned before. Shenatan mikvodo lebasar vadam. Blessed are you, Hashem, who has given of your honor to flesh and blood. Amar le hahu tzedoki. The heretic said to him, Leman dilo chazitle kamivarchat. You're blessing something you can't even see? This is not a very nice heretic. He should just keep his mouth quiet. So what happened to this heretic? Unfortunately, it didn't end well, because some say that his friends plucked his eyes out because he was making fun of the blind. It was midah keneged midah, that one day he would lose his sight. It was measure for measure. And some say Rav Sheshet looked in his direction. Of course, you couldn't see him, so when it says that he looked at him, it doesn't mean that he actually saw him. And then he became a pile of bones, which doesn't necessarily mean magically right on the spot he disintegrated into a pile of bones, but what it means is that because he crossed Rav Sheshet, and Rav Sheshet was hurt by the harassment of this tzedoki, his end happened quickly. Rav Shelah Nagdela Hu Gavra de Bal Mitzrit. The Rav Shelah once subjected some person who had relations with, it says here Mitzrit, in other versions it says Goya. He had relations with a Gentile woman, and so he was whipped by Rav Shelah because that was against halacha. Azalachal bekortze beit malka. He went and he was malshin Rav Shelah to the king. In other words, he went to the court of the king and tried to get the rabbis in trouble, because he was punished by the rabbis for having this illicit relationship with a non-Jew. So he was like the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, where, after the whole thing, he goes and he tries to get the Jews in trouble with the Romans and so on. So he did the same thing. He goes and tries to Amar ikachad gavrab Yudai tekadayin dina below hermenad de malka. He said there is one Jewish guy who is giving judgment without the permission of the king. Okay, he's breaking away with the king. So he's breaking away from the king's authority. Shadar alei pristika. They sent him a summons, basically. Kiata. When he came, Amrele, they said to him, nigadete lahai. They asked him, why did you whip this person? Because they're trying to set him up, right? Because the person, the criminal, so to speak, who was whipped, complained to the authorities. So now the authorities are asking Rav Shelah, why did you whip him? And he's not. What is he going to tell them? Oh, because he had relations with a non-Jew. That's not going to be a very popular answer, is it, to a non-Jewish court? So Amar Lehu, he said, Deba'al Chamarta. He had relations with a donkey. Oh, really? Oh, Amrele, he said to him, Itlach Sadeh, do you have any witnesses for this? Amar Lehu, yes. Ata Eliyahu, Admele Ke'inish Vasid. Eliyahu Navi came looking like a person and gave testimony. Now, whenever it says Eliyahu Navi came, it could mean it literally, or it could also mean that a person fortuitously happened to be there. In other words, Eliyahu showing up can sometimes be a metaphor for the idea that a person shows up in the right place at the right time, as it sometimes means in the Talmud that somebody showed up in the right place at the right time and served an important purpose. Okay, Amrele, they said to him, Yachi baraket alahu, then why did you only whip him? You should have killed him. What kind of depraved person is this that he has a relationship with a donkey? Amar Lahu, he said to him, no, anan mi omad galinan me'arin, let lan rishutal lemiktal. Atun mai deba'itun avidube. He said to them, from the day that we left our land, in other words, from the day that we've been exiled, we cannot judge capital cases anymore. So that's why we didn't kill him. but you guys do whatever you want. As they were looking into the case, Badina, Patach Rav Shelah Amar, as they were analyzing the case, Rav Shelah started saying a pasuk. He said, Lecha Hashem ha'gedula v'gvura v'tiferet v'netzach v'hod, etc. He was saying, to you Hashem is the greatness and the might, etc. So they asked him, Amrele, they said to him, Micah, Amrat, what are you saying? What is that Hebrew mambo jumbo you're saying over there? Amar lahu, he said to them, Hachi ka'imna, this is what I was, kamina, this is what I'm saying. Hachi ka'amina, berich rachmana, blessed is the merciful one, blessed is Hashem. Diyahiv malchuta barak in malchuta derkiya, that has made a kingdom on earth like the kingdom in heaven. V'yahev lechu shultana v'rachamei dina, and He's given you power and love of justice, because I see how much you love justice and you care about justice. So He's really laying it on thick. Okay, but you see that this story follows the previous story, because the same idea of the kingdom on earth being like the kingdom in Shamayim. Right, the kingdom in heaven and kingdom on earth. Before, Rav Sheshet had compared the kingdom on earth to the kingdom on heaven, in heaven, by saying that the kingdom in heaven, it's quiet when the king comes, and it's quiet when the king on earth comes. And now this story has the same concept, comparing the kingdom on earth and heaven. Amru, they said, Chaviva alei yikarad malchuta kulehai. They said, look at how dear to him our kingdom is. This guy really respects us. No, it's the opposite. We heard that he was disrespectful. He's not disrespectful. Yahweh lekulpa. They gave him a staff as a leader. They invested him with the power to lead. Amrule, they said to him, Don dina, you have the power to judge now. So not only is he not in trouble for judging as a rogue judge, now he has official imprimatur of the authorities to judge. Ki havan nafik, as he was going out, Amarle hau gavra. Avid Rahmani Nisal Shakare. So that original criminal that he had whipped, that tried to get him in trouble, and now he's turned the tables on him, said to him, oh, does God do miracles for liars? You lied and said that I had a relationship with a donkey, and now now you're getting me to be killed now, right? Because they're taking him out to kill him now. So he said, is this the right thing, that you turn the tables on me like with lying? Hachi amarle. So he said, I'm sorry. So it says, Avid Rahman Nisal Shakare Hachi. Is this the way God does miracles for liars? So Amarle said to him, Rasha, wicked person, Lav Chamareikru. Aren't the Gentiles referred to as donkeys? Dichtiv Asher Besar Chamorim Besaram, because it says their flesh is like the flesh of donkeys. When it was trying to talk about how the nations of the world were very animalistic, it called them donkeys. So he said, that's what I meant. Okay, so he said to him, he saw now that what was this recalcitrant guy going to do now? He was going to tell him, hey, he called you guys donkeys. You don't realize he didn't mean that I really had relations with the donkey. He's calling you guys donkeys. So Amar Hayrodefu this guy's going to try to get me killed now, and the rule is if somebody tries to kill you, you have to kill them first. So he hit him with his new staff that he just got and killed him. And of course, when the authorities came over, what's he going to say? This guy tried to hurt me, I had to kill him. He said, since a miracle has been done for me, with this pasuk, that I said this pasuk, and therefore they gave me the authority to judge, therefore, darshinale, I'm going to say a drasha, I'm going to say an analysis of this pasuk. Lecha Hashem ha'gedula, what does it mean? To you, Hashem is the greatness. Zo ma'aseh bereshit, this is talking about creation. The greatness of Hashem is the creation. Because it says He makes great things that they're unfathomable. V'ha'givura, and the might of Hashem, Zo Yitziat Mitzrayim, this is the Exodus from Egypt, Shenemar Vayar Yisrael et hayad gedola, because it says that the Jewish people saw the strong hand of Hashem in Mitzrayim. V'atiferet, the glory, Zo Chamal Vanash Amadu Lo Yoshua, Shenemar Vaydom Hashemesh V'yareach Amad, because this glory of Hashem is His ability to stop the sun and the moon in the times of Yoshua. V'netzach, and what does it mean? The eternity, the netzach, or the it could mean like the victory. Okay, Zoma Palatashel Romi. This is the fall of the Roman Empire. V'chenu Omer v'yez nitzcham al begadai. It says their nitzcham, which is a metaphor here for their blood. Really, their blood is splattered on my clothing, as Hashem is describing how He's victorious over the kingdom of the empire of Rome. But nitzcham is also from the word netzach, their eternity. So therefore, netzach is a reference to that. the downfall of the Roman Empire. Ve'ahod, and another word for glory is Milchemet Nachalei Arnon. This is talking about the war of Nachalei Arnon that happened at the rivers of Arnon, as we learned earlier about the mountains flattening and the Amorites who were hiding in there being killed as a result. Etc. Everything that is in heaven and earth belongs to you. This is the war against Sisra in the book of Shoftim. Because it says that the stars from heaven fought against Sisra. So when it says everything in the heavens and earth belongs to you, Hashem, it's talking about that. So then it says L'cha Hashem HaMamlacha VaMitnaseh, right? The Chol Rosh, as we know the rest of the pasuk. So L'cha Hashem HaMamlacha, to you Hashem is the kingdom. This is the war against Amalek. Because it says the hand is on the throne of Hashem. VaMitnaseh, and the transcendence. VaMitnaseh Zom Melchemet Gog uMagog. This is the war against Gog and Magog. Hineni Elecha Gog Nesi Rosh Meshech v'Tuval. That I am against you, Gog, the prince and leader of Meshech and Tuval. So since it has the word Nasi in there, and mitnaseh, it's a reference to Gog and Magog. Lechol lerosh, the head to everything. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, afilu resh gargita min shemayam anulei. Even the head of water, in other words, even the person who's in charge of dispensing water, Hashem is the one who chooses him. So that's why it says lechol lerosh. Every head is chosen by Hashem. So what does that mean? So each word in this pasuk, or each phrase in this pasuk, is a reference to Hashem vanquishing human power, or first it talks about the creation in Yetziat Mitzrayim, and all of these different terms of praise are talking about Hashem being victorious over various human powers. Nitatana. In another braita we said, Mishmei Rabbi Akiva, the name of Rabbi Akiva, L'cha Hashem HaGedulah, Zo Kriyat Yamsuf. That what is L'cha Hashem HaGedulah? To you, Hashem, is the greatness, is a reference not to the creation, according to Rabbi Akiva, but the splitting of the sea. V'givura, and the might, Zomakat Bechorot, this is a reference to the plague of the firstborn. V'tiferet, and the glory or the splendor, Zomatan Torah, this is the giving of the Torah. Ve'anetzach, and the eternity or the victory, Zo Yerushalayim, this is Jerusalem, Vehahod, and the glory, Zo Bet HaMikdash, this is the Bet HaMikdash. In other words, according to Rabbi Akiva, all of the words here are references to some stage in the redemption of the Jewish people that was effectuated by Hashem. Now we turn to Amud Bet, Nunchet Amud Bet, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Haro'eh Batei Yisrael b'Yishuvan, when a person sees the resettled houses of Israel, like Rashi says in the settlement of the Second Temple times, he says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam matziv givul almana, who has set up the givul, the border of the widow, because the Jewish nation was like the land of Israel was like a widow, so to speak, because it was incomplete, it had lost what made it complete, and the Jews returned to it, so it's like the widow is now restored to her former glory, so to speak. B'churbanan omer, when he sees them destroyed, Baruch Dayan ha'emet, then he would say, Baruch Dayan ha'emet, blessed is the true judge. When he sees the houses of the idolaters, it's settled, Bet Geim Yisach Hashem, the house of the proud, the house of the arrogant, Hashem should destroy. B'churbanan omer, El Nekamot Hashem, El Nekamot Afiyah, he should say when he sees them destroyed that the God of vengeance is Hashem, the God of vengeance has appeared. So, in other words, when you see the Jewish people thriving, you say a blessing that's positive. When you see them in their downfall, you say a blessing, Dayan Ha'emet. When you see the idolaters, and here we're talking about wicked idolaters, of course, there's a blessing that's a negative one. And when you see the idolaters downfall, then you would say a blessing that is a positive one, recognizing the midat hadin, that they received their judgment. Now we have a little story. Ulav Rav Chizda havuka azlei be'orcha. Ulan Rav Chizda were walking along the way. Kimatua pitchat debei Rav Chana bar Chanilai neged Rav Chizda. It says that when they were walking along the way, so what happened was that they came to the house of Rav Chana bar Chanilai. So it says, Nagad Rav Chizda v'itnach, it says that Rav Chizda it seems like means he bent over and he sighed. Amar le Ula said to him, Amai ka mitnacht, why are you sighing? Rav said, that sighing breaks half of the body of a person. Because it says that when you sigh, it's going to be b'shivron votnaim. It's going to break your loins. In other words, that's the lower half of your body. So sighing is something that's bad for you. Moreover, Rabbi Yochanan amar af kol gufo shel adam shenemar vayeki yomro elecha al ma ata ne'enach v'amarta el shema ki va'av v'names kol lev. And when people ask you, why are you sighing? You're going to say, because of a news that's going to melt every heart. In other words, and then it goes on to describe the falling apart of the entire body, okay? So what it means is that the entire body will fall apart as a result of sighing, not just half of it. So it's a bad thing to sigh. You shouldn't be sighing. Why are you sighing? And he answered him, Amar le hechilo etnach, how can I not sigh? Beta dahavu ba shitin afyata bimama, shitin afyata b'lelia. It used to be that there were 60 bakers working in this house at night and 60 working in the day. Ve'afyan kolma lecholman ditzarich. And not only did they bake what was necessary for Rav Chana bar Chanilai, but anybody who needed anything, they baked for them. V'lo shakal yadam min kisa desavar dilma atei ani bar tovim. And he would never take his hand out of his pocket because he thought maybe a poor person who came from a respectable lineage is going to come. Ve'adimatule la kisa kamichsif. And I have to give him charity because now he's fallen on hard times. And the time it takes me to put my hand in my pocket and take out the money, he's going to be embarrassed. So I need to be ready to give him money immediately. And there were 4 openings on the 4 sides of the house, just like Abraham Avinu's famous tent. Anybody who came hungry left full. And they would put there avra'ai, they would put on the outside wheat and barley outside and available for people to come in times of famine, so that anybody who was embarrassed to come during the day could actually come at night and take it, what was left outside for them to come take it if they were poor. And now I see that this house, which was such a pillar of chesed and tzedakah, is now lying in ruins. How can I not sigh to see that? Amar Lei said, Rabbi Yochanan said, because from the day that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, there was a gezerah, there was a decree that the houses of the righteous should also be destroyed. Shneimar, Boznei Shem Tzivaot, Imlo, Batim, Rabim, L'Shamai Yiyu. Gidolim v'tovim me'en Yoshev. In the ears of Hashem, of hosts, if not, in other words, he promised that many houses are going to be for destruction, and great and good ones are going to be without any inhabitant. In other words, there's going to be a destruction on the houses of the great and good people. Rabbi Yochanan said, and one day they will be restored. It says those who trust in God are like the Mount Zion. Just like Mount Har Zion, Hashem will one day restore to its inhabitants. Will restore to it being inhabited properly again. That one day the houses of the tzaddikim will also be restored. So don't despair. Just like the Beit HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt, the houses of the tzaddikim will also be rebuilt. He saw that he wasn't satisfied with this. He was still depressed over the fact that he saw this house broken down. So he answered him and said, think about it. How could the Eved be better than the Rav? How could the servant be better than the master? If the house of the master is destroyed, meaning the Beit HaMikdash, the house of God is destroyed, certainly the house of the servants of God is also going to be destroyed as well. If somebody comes to a cemetery, he says, Baruch Asher yatzar etchem badin, v'zan etchem badin, v'chilkel etchem badin, v'asav etchem badin, v'atid l'hakimechem badin. It says you should say the blessing that, and again, it would be with the name of Hashem, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech ha'olam, Asher yatzar etchem badin, who formed you in judgment, v'zan etchem badin, and nourished you in judgment, and sustained you in judgment, and he gathered you in judgment, and one day he will make you stand again in judgment. Okay, that's what you're supposed to say when you go to the cemetery if you haven't been there for the past 30 days. Many cemeteries actually have that beracha on the wall when you come up. I remember seeing that in some cemeteries that I've been to, but it's only if you see it less frequently than every 30 days. Mar Bred Ravina Misayemba Mishmed Rav Nachman. Mar, the son of Ravina, concluded the blessing in the name of Rav Nachman with an ending, V'yodem ispar kulachem, that he knows the number of all of you, V'huatid l'hachayotchem u'lekayem etchem, and one day he's going to give you life again and sustain you. Baruch mechayeh hametim, blessed are you Hashem, who brings the dead back to life. And if he sees the cemeteries of the wicked idolaters, he says, Bosha imachem, that same pasuk that you say when you see all a throng of the living idolaters, you would say when you see the cemetery as well, which is your mother should be embarrassed, etc., etc. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, if a person hasn't seen his friend in 30 days, you're supposed to say Shechayanu when you see them. Now that means if you haven't seen them or contacted them. Nowadays we contact them by the phone, or we see them on Skype or whatever. So we can't necessarily say that we haven't seen them in 30 days unless we really haven't had any contact in 30 days, and then we see our friend, we say Shechayanu. Of course, Tosafot says that's only if you're happy to see him. If he's somebody that you're glad you haven't seen in 30 days and you wish you hadn't seen them in 30 years, you don't say Shechayanu. You say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet then.
Once again, you're saying Bracha with Malchut.
Yeah, that's with Malchut, yeah. So the Gemara doesn't recognize such a thing as bracha without Shem and Malchut. We only do that when we have sfekot. We do that because we're not sure about certain things. No. But that's only if you're happy. Lachar Yud Bet Chodesh, if you haven't seen him in a year, Omer Baruch Mechayeh Hametim. You say the blessing of Shechayanu and Baruch Mechayeh Hametim. You also say, Blessed are you Hashem who has brought the dead back to life. Amar Rav said, Enamet Mishtakech Min Alev El Achar Shenim Asar Chodesh. Nobody forgets somebody who died until at least a year has gone by. Shenemar Nishkachti Kamet Milev Hayeti Kechli Oved. Because it says in the pasuk, I've been forgotten like a dead person from the heart, and I am like a lost vessel. And the halacha is that we assume that somebody who's lost something, after a year of losing it, they finally give up. Within a year, they're still hopeful. Maybe they're going to come across the thing that they lost. But after a year, we assume they're not looking for it anymore. So too, by saying I'm like a dead person who's forgotten, I'm like a missing vessel, we say the same rule, that after a year, a person is able to get over somebody who has passed away. Rav Papa, Rav Huna, Rav Yoshua, Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, Havuka Azlei B'Orcha. They were walking on the way. Pag'u Bei Berav Chanina B'Rei Rav Ika. They came upon Rav Chanina, the son of Ravika. Amrule, they said to him, Bahadei dechazinach barichinan alach tarte. When we saw you, we said two barachot. Baruch asher chalak mechochmato lire'av. First of all, the blessing on seeing a Talmid Chacham, which is, Blessed are you Hashem, shechalak mechochmato lire'av. That he shared his wisdom with those who fear him. V'shechayanu, and we also said the blessing of Shechayanu because we haven't seen you in 30 days and we missed you. Amar lahu, he said to them, Ananami kevan dachazintinchu chashavtinchu ilavai keshitin ravan bet Yisrael ubarchina alaychu tilata. And I blessed. So he said, when I saw you guys, to me, you are like 600,000 Jews. You're like the whole Jewish people. And therefore, I said upon you 3 barachot. Hanach tarte, the 2 that you said, which is on Talmidei Chachamim, Shechalak michochmato l'ra'av, and Shechayanu, because I haven't seen you, and Ubaruch Chacham Arazim, and also, Blessed are you Hashem, wise one of secrets, that we said before, is the blessing that you say when you see 600,000 Jews. Okay, so what did he mean that I said that bracha? So there are different interpretations. Why would he say that bracha on seeing two people? So either because the reason why you say the blessing of Chacham Arazim when you say 600,000 people is because you assume because of the different minds, that each one has a different mind and a different personality. But somebody who is a towering Talmid Chacham, in a way, encompasses all of that. They have all of that understanding, all of those different perspectives encapsulated into one person, and therefore it's possible to say that bracha. That's one interpretation. Another possibility is that if you are the outstanding Talmidei Chachamim of the generation, it's like you're the whole Jewish people. It's like they say that Moshe Rabbeinu was shakul keneged kol Yisraeli, was considered like equal to the entire Jewish people. So in that way, like there's a midrash that says that Yocheved had 600,000 Jews in her belly, and when she was pregnant with 600,000 Jews, what does that mean? It means that that Moshe Rabbeinu is like 600,000 Jews. He himself is like the entire Jewish people. So one of those things was what he meant. But they said, they said to him, Hakimat kulehai, are you so smart? So there's a question what they meant. Why did they say to him, are you so smart? Meaning, are you able to really see in us that we have such deep wisdom? Or that you can determine that we are the leaders of Israel the way that you say? Yahaveh be'enayu v'shachiv. They put their eyes on him and he died. Now again, this doesn't mean that they had like some magical vision that they looked at him and he dropped dead right on the spot. What it means was that they saw in him, they perceived in him some negative characteristic that he arrogated to himself the ability to determine what level they were on, and because that trait was displeasing to them, that caused something to happen to him that was bad. It doesn't mean that he just collapsed right there in the middle of the street. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, "Aroet habakanim," somebody who sees overly freckled people. Omer Baruch Mishaneh Abriot. He says the blessing, blessed are you Hashem, who diversifies, Mishaneh. He has lots of diverse creations. Maybe they raise an objection. Ra'ayta Kushi says if you saw a very, very dark black person, Vieta Gichor, or a red-colored person, Vieta Lavkan, or you saw an albino person, Vieta Kipeach. Rashi says a Kipeach means a very wide person, like a very, very obese, a gigantically obese person. Or another possibility is somebody who's very, very elongated, very, very tall and stretched out. Vieta nanas, or you saw a dwarf. Okay? Vieta darnikos, or you saw a darnikos, and according to Rashi, a darnikos is a reference to somebody who's either has something that's strange about their... He's either talking about somebody who is has a strange mouth, or it's talking about somebody who has some other kind of a discolored skin. But in any case, Omer Baruch Mishaneh et Habriot, he says Baruch Mishaneh et Habriot, blessed is Hashem who makes different kinds of creations. In other words, anything that's strange or unusual, you said Mishaneh Habriot. Whether it is some kind of deformity, or it's some kind of discoloration of their skin, or whatever that is. Eta kitea, if you see somebody who's an amputee, vieta suma, or you see a blind person, viet petuyei arosh, or you see somebody who has, according to Rashi, this means hair that's like felt. In other words, he doesn't have separate hair, but his hair is all like matted together as one entity. Okay, or it could mean a flat-headed person, vieta chiger, or you see a lame person, vieta mukeshechin, or somebody who's suffering from boils all over their body, vieta bakanim, or freckled people who have freckles all over their body. Omer Baruch Dayan Emet. You say, blessed are you Hashem, the true judge. So we have a problem, because first we said that you're supposed to say Mishaneh Beriot, that it's strange, right? It's a strange looking person. But then it says say Dayan Emet, which means the true judge. So which one is true? No problem. That there's two different cases. If you see somebody who is born with a deformity, they were born the way that they are, so then you say Mishaneh Abriot because Hashem made them that way. But if they developed it later, okay, then you say Dayan Ha'emet because it happened to them later in life. So you say blessed is the true judge. Dikanami, we can also see a proof for this. Dikatane, because it says Dumya Tekitea. In the list, it compares the person who has freckles in the second half to somebody who's an amputee. Shemamina, you see from that just like an amputee, it's somebody who loses their leg. Kitea means somebody whose leg is cut off. They had a leg and it was cut off. So there's a difference between somebody who has a deformity that they got as a result of an accident or as a result of something happening to them or an illness versus somebody who was born with a congenital kind of a defect. The rabbis taught haro epil, somebody who sees an elephant, kof, a monkey, vekipof, an owl. Omer Baruch Mishaneh Habriot, he says, blessed are you Hashem, who changes, who makes a diverse array of creations. Ra'ah Beriot tovot v'ilanot tovot. If you saw beautiful creations or beautiful trees, Omer Baruch shekach lo ba'olamo, he says, blessed are you Hashem shekach lo ba'olamo, that you have such things in your world. And in fact, there's a story elsewhere in the Talmud that tells of seeing a beautiful woman. Even that today we say, why are you looking at women? But it talks about I think it was Rabban Gamliel or Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, I can't remember which one, seeing a beautiful woman and saying Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekach lo ba'olamo, and they said, why are you looking at women? And they said, it's not that he was staring, that you saw her. There's a difference between somebody who's checking out women, gazing, and somebody who sees. You see it, you don't have to be in denial that you see someone beautiful. It's not like, you can't tell.
Maybe it was his wife.
It must have been. No, it wasn't. I mean, I'm sure he had a beautiful wife too. I'm not trying to say otherwise. Ala zikin. So it says ala zikin. This was from the Mishnah. One of the things that is one of the phenomena in creation where a person says a blessing. Ala zikin. So my zikin. What is zikin? Amar Shmuel kochva dishavit. It's talking about either a shooting star or a comet. Amar Shmuel, and Shmuel said Nehirin li shevilei dishmaya kishvilei dinahar da'ah. The paths of the heavens are as clear to me as the paths of Nehar Da'ah. Many places in the Talmud it talks about how Shmuel was an astronomer. He studied astronomy, he studied the constellations, and he was very, very familiar with all the stars and the different and all the various galaxies and so on. And he says, however, except for the shooting star or the comet, I don't know how to explain it. It's just a random phenomenon. I don't know how to explain it. Because in other words, he knew the regularity of the patterns of the stars. Because if you know a little bit about astronomy, you know that the different constellations that you see, they shift over time. There's differences depending on the time of year. And I don't know much about it myself personally, but I was never an amateur astronomer. But they shift over time, and so somebody who's used to the regularity of the patterns knows what to expect. And he would see these comets or shooting stars come, and they didn't fit in with the expected pattern. So he said, I don't know what to make of them. However, he did know that there was a tradition that Ugmire de la Avar Kisla, that you would never see one of these shooting stars or comets pass through a certain constellation in the sky. The Avar Kisla, Harib Alma, and if it ever did, the world would be destroyed. But don't we see that it actually does pass through? No. We see that it passes through. It looks as if it's going through, but really it's just the light from the comet or shooting star that appears to be going through, but really it never passes through a certain part of the sky. Rav Huna breder Rav Yoshua Amar Vilonu de Mekareya de Megalgel uMechaze Neorad Dirkia. So there's a machloket here about what they're commenting on. Are they commenting on the original question of what are zikin? That first Shmuel said zikin are a shooting star or comet, and now comes along Rav Huna and says no. What it is, what zikin are, is when one layer of the firmament is open and you see the light from a layer underneath. It's some flash in the sky, basically. Or, according to that's what Rashi says, that they're disagreeing about what zikin are. According to Tosafot, no, this is part of the discussion here. That how come it looks like comets sometimes travel through this part of the sky that they're not supposed to? He says, no, that's not actually the comet. That's where the sky is there's a disruption in the shamayim, and you're seeing light that's really just a disturbance from a layer of the heavens, because the way they conceptualized the heavens, that there were different layers, that's what you're really seeing.
Or you wouldn't be destroyed by a shooting star. I mean, you would be destroyed if a comet hit the earth, but you wouldn't.
Well, that's not what they're. He's saying that's a sign that the world is going to be destroyed. He's not saying that's going to destroy you. No.
Right.
Yeah. So Rav Ashi Amar Kochvahu de Akar Mehai Gisa de Kisla v'Chazei leChavrei Mehach Gisa uMiv'it uMechazek Iman de Avar. So this is the the other interpretation, and again, the same question applies. Is he trying to explain what zikin are, or is he trying to explain how come it looks like comets or shooting stars pass through a part of the sky that they're not supposed to? He says sometimes it's really that a star moved within a constellation and the other one moved as a result of the first one moving, and it looks like a comet or shooting star passed through that constellation, and really it didn't. It was just the motion of the stars in the sky, and it's just an optical illusion that it looked that way. So either that's explaining what zikin are in general, or that's explaining how come it seems like shooting stars or comets are passing through a part of the sky that they're not supposed to. Either way, then the Gemara is going to go on to an astronomical discussion that will take us well into the next Amud. So we're going to conclude here for today. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.